After starting out Wednesday, February 7th, and staying in Bowling Green, Kentucky, on February 8th, we drove from Bowling Green, Kentucky to just northeast of Texarkana, Arkansas, or Texas, whatever. A major highlight for us was driving through Memphis and past the Methodist Memorial Hospital where Chrissy and Robin were born, and then over the Mississippi into Arkansas. On Friday, February 9th, we packed up from the Coulter farmstead in Washington, Arkansas. Had to clean up Shelby from a romp with the farm pooch. We then went over and saw Bill Clinton's birthplace. I took a pic and sent it to our conservative buddy for his wall. We traveled southwest from just above Texarkana to just west of San Antonio. Speed limit 80, not for Vanna White. Between Austin and San Antonio, we found the lovely Texas Hill Country. We camped at the same spot we did 3 years ago, Crames Mill Park on Canyon Lake, much lower than it was. We parked ourselves at Canyon Lake west of Austin and San Antonio for the past few days. The lake was very low from the drought for the past few years. One of the neat things we did was drive further west to the LBJ Ranch. This ranch, where Lyndon Johnson was born and where he and Lady Bird lived, was one of 9 that he owned, actually the smallest of the 9. The United States of America jet is still there, as is the landing strip on the quote-unquote Western White House, as the ranch was called. We saw his birth home, he and Lady Bird's house, and their graves. I don't know why their names are so hard to read. The descendants of the Herefords they raised still wander the land. It's still a working ranch. On the way back, we stopped at nearby Blanco, Texas, and had some Tex-Mex. This is really out in the boondocks. Come and eat it, of course, is a takeoff on the Alamo motto, come and take it. So we're leaving the area today and heading for Big Bend National Park. So westward ho. We're traveling today to Big Bend National Park, which is way down on the border of Mexico. We traveled about 450 miles southwest to this national park, which is the size of Rhode Island. Most of it was on I-10, which looks like this most of the way. There were many interesting things as we drove south of I-10, such as these wild donkeys and wonderful tourist attractions. Here we stayed at the old ghost town of Terlingua. The first day we traveled to the Boquillas de Carmen canyons on the Rio Grande. The river forms the Mexican-American border. We got a great view of Mexico across the river, but unfortunately the port of entry was closed that day, so no souvenirs. After that, we took the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive to the Santa Elena Canyon, where the Rio Grande is cut a hole straight through the mountains. Happy Valentine's Day from the Rio Grande River in Big Bend National Park. On the second day, we were in much less barren land as we drove to Chisos Basin and took an excruciating hike 2 miles down, 2 miles back up to the place they called the Window. In bear and cougar country, the elevation drop of about 500 feet happened mostly in the first 0.2 of a mile, but it seemed to me to be forever. We were a couple of pooped septuagenarians when Laura took these beautiful pictures of a local bluebird and an excellent specimen of a roadrunner. Tomorrow we are off to New Mexico. Arriba! On Friday, the 16th of February, we drove about 400 miles from Big Bend, Texas to Rockhound State Park in New Mexico. This is one of our favorite stays, and we made good use of the hiking trails. On the 18th of February, we drove about 250 miles to Patagonia Lake State Park in southern Arizona near the Mexican border. Along the way, we drove through the metropolis of El Paso, looking just across the Rio Grande to Juarez, the quote-unquote murder capital of the world. Talk about two different worlds colliding. Just past this on I-10, we viewed the usual reason why you shouldn't eat beef. We used Patagonia Lake as a base to visit surrounding areas. This is Apache country. Thank goodness we haven't met the ghost of Geronimo. Our first stop on February 19th was Tombstone, where we met Doc Holliday and then taught Shelby about gunfighting with Wild Bill Hickok. After that, we continued south to the uniquely built into the mountains copper mining town of Bisbee.
It's always for you.
This is only one section of the humongous copper mine here. No trip this far south would be complete without a look at the wall at the Naco, Arizona crossing, and from a distance at the memorial to Coronado, the Spanish conquistador who crossed here looking for the 7 cities of gold and winding up in Kansas, much to the glee of the Native Americans. We were very fortunate to meet one of the only remaining members of the original expedition. After one of Laura's beautiful Patagonia Lake sunset pictures, on the 19th of February, we drove about 50 miles to Tubac, Arizona for lunch. This is a great artsy community about 20 miles from the border. We had our favorite Mediterranean pizza and margaritas at Shelby's Cafe with our own Shelby right by the table. The next day, we drove back through the town of Patagonia and took a super ATV tour of the Million Acre Empire Ranch, where John Wayne and others filmed westerns. Mount Wrightson over there is about 8,000 feet up. We are already 4,000 to 5,000 feet up in this area. On the 22nd of February, we left Patagonia Lake and drove about 85 miles north to Gilbert Ray Campground in Tucson Mountain Park, just below Saguaro National Park. Along the way, we stopped in Nogales to do some needed laundry and fill our propane tank so we could continue to have heat and hot water and fuel for the stove. Continuing north, we got through our 4th Border Patrol site. No drugs for us. Coming into our Tucson campground, we had a wonderful sunset. It's our 4th time at this favorite place. Here is a picture of a wonderful desert beauty along the way.
Are you taking a movie?
Yes. The next day we were off through beautiful Gates Pass to ascend Chimney Rock near Mount Lemmon, east of Tucson. This involved a very hot ATV, some tricky maneuvering, and a whole bunch of fun. Coming home, we stopped at our favorite Mexican place, Mariscos Chihuahua, and picked up their signature dish, Comoranos, that is shrimp caluchi, which we enjoyed just as much as last year. On the 24th of February, we had a rest day to pay some bills and do some other chores. Here is Laura hard at work at our site. Note our beloved Starlink satellite setup and Vanna White's open hood. This is done at night to keep the pack rats from chewing your engine wires. I believe this is an old wives' tale, but everybody here does it. Also note the 16% humidity, crazy, resulting in us having absolutely no arthritic pain at all.
Sunday, the 25th of February, was our last day in Tucson, and we took a hike in the foothills of the Catalina Mountains. Shelby had a great time in the streams, and we had a lot to clean up. On Monday, the 26th of February, we traveled north to Lost Dutchman State Park in the Superstition Mountains east of Scottsdale. The Lost Dutchman supposedly had a hidden vein of gold up in them there hills, which no one to this day has uncovered. The area we are visiting is called the Apache Trail, and our first day there, we traveled east to Superior and Globe, big mining towns. The scenic drive along the way was spectacular. We dined on scrumptious burros, also known as burritos, at La Luz del Dia. The next day, we met up with our great friends Ray and Amy Slaybaugh and traveled along the Apache Trail to beautiful Canyon Lake. Along the way, we stopped at the famous Tortilla Flat Roadhouse for some great music plus food and drink. As you can see, we are feeling no pain. We continued upward and eastward on the trail for about 5 miles before a landslide had blocked the rest of the way up to Roosevelt Lake. That's the road away off in the distance that we could not get to. Coming home, Ray and Amy spotted a beaver, or maybe a groundhog, who knows. We left our campsite Tuesday the 27th, and the sleigh boss graciously put up with us for 2 nights at their beautiful home in Scottsdale. The first day we had a very informative visit to Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin West, where the master would train apprentice architects and at times would collaborate with Georgia O'Keeffe. The next day we ventured eastward again and took a drive up to Saguaro Lake, another lake along the Salt River. First, we stopped at the 350-foot fountain in Fountain Hills and viewed some amazing wild horses along the way. On a boat tour of the lake, we viewed the 4 peaks, which contain the only amethyst mineral vein in the Americas.
By comparison, the largest catfish ever caught in the lake was 52 pounds.
We capped off our visit with a concert by Walter Trout, blues guitar legend and liver transplant survivor, which makes him tops on Doug's list. Great stuff! So now it's on to the Colorado River and Lake Havasu. Wait, we're going to Lake Havasu? On Saturday, March 1st, we left Scottsdale and started our journey to Parker, Arizona and River Island State Park, where we camp every time we're out here. Along the way, we stayed the night in Salome, Arizona and visited Quartzsite. Quartzsite is where many snowbirds fire up their RVs and stay for the winter in the desert. You might remember this is where Frances McDormand stayed in the Oscar-winning movie Nomadland. It is an amazing place, if you like camping in the boondocks, in the desert, for the winter. Anyway, we arrived at River Island State Park on Sunday, March 3rd. It is an interesting place with Arizona on one side and California on the other side of the Colorado River. Housing is like we have never seen before. Our first outing was to hike up to the overlook next to the park, where we could see both the California and Arizona sides. This also overlooks our campground below. We are the smallest unit in the park if you can make us out on the left. And oh yes, that's us on top there. Here we are below the Parker Dam on the Colorado, the one that created Lake Havasu to the north, and Lake Havasu City, the one with the London Bridge that was bought, dismantled, and reconstructed there. Our next venture was to rent a 200 horsepower, 92 mile per hour UTV to explore the mountains around Lake Havasu. Due to rather cautious, insert annoying, driving, Doug finally managed to get up to 30 miles per hour on the straightaways. Woohoo! On this outing, we passed a fork in the road, a big spider, and some other strange desert objects, but never found the prospector's cabin we sought. Thankfully, we got back before the phone with the GPS ran out of juice. Gulp. As we raced along laughing nervously, I discovered that was one way to make Doug speed up. Hasta luego! On Wednesday, March 6th, we left the Colorado River and drove north about 350 miles to Quail Creek State Park in Utah, near Zion National Park. Along the way, we stopped to view Lake Mead above Hoover Dam on the Colorado, which looked a bit more healthy than last year. After driving through Las Vegas, we drove north along the Virgin River, which flows south out of Zion to Lake Mead. Coming to our Utah campsite, we drove through the cut in the mountains made by the Virgin River over the eons. Quite something. We had a wonderful view of Quail Creek Reservoir, trying saying that 3 times, from our site. The next day, we explored around Hurricane, Utah, where, despite some rain, we had a great view of the mountains up to Zion and toured Sand Hollow State Park, where the beaches are red. On Friday, March 8th, we drove a circular route east of our campground, which started with a very special UTV and hiking tour through the Peekaboo Slot Canyon. This canyon just blew us away with its rich colors. No flash floods that day, of course. Here are some pictures we took of the canyon. We took the scenic northern route through Zion on the way back. There are not many panoramas which can match the one coming out of the Zion Tunnel on Utah State Route 9. We topped off our stay in Utah with a hike on the White Reef Trail in the Red Cliffs National Conservation Area, and we're off to another new adventure.
On Sunday, March 10th, we broke camp at Quail Creek State Park and drove about 170 miles east to Page, Arizona, which is on Lake Powell. We drove past the entrance to the north rim of the Grand Canyon, which, of course, was closed for the winter. We reached almost 8,000 feet in altitude at this point. Coming further east, the beautiful Vermilion Cliffs were in full view, and we encountered great rock formations along the way, including those at a place called Cliff Dwellers. The ruins there, however, turned out to be those of the white man, formed not that many eons ago. We brought a super Navajo Dreamcatcher for our wall and moved on. The next day, we followed many people to the magnificent Horseshoe Bend on the Colorado River. Yes, it's the one you always see in pictures. This is Glen Canyon, just below the Glen Canyon Dam, which was completed in 1963 and created Lake Powell. As you can see, it's a very popular attraction, and the view is well worth the visit. Our next task was to give Shelby some needed exercise, so we took a hike to the Hanging Gardens on the east side of Glen Canyon. All three of us had a great time among the rocks. The gardens proved difficult to find, however, and along the way we had our first casualty when Laura tripped over a quote-unquote sticky-up piece of rock. No big deal, though. Lake Powell and the Glen Canyon were quite awe-inspiring to us. This is my favorite view of Lake Powell from the Wahi Marina overlook, with the lone boat in the foreground and the dam in the upper right. The next video shows Glen Canyon in the downstream side of the dam, moving up to a view of the dam itself. Finally, we have a dizzying look at this engineering marvel from the top. We have now traveled along the Colorado River from the Parker Dam at Lake Havasu to the Davis Dam at Lake Mojave to the Hoover Dam at Lake Mead, and finally to the Glen Canyon Dam at Lake Powell. Above Lake Powell, the Colorado River flows down from its headwaters near Denver in the Rocky Mountains. The Glen Canyon Dam at 710 feet high is only 16 feet shorter than the Hoover Dam at 726 feet. Our final view of magnificent Lake Powell came from its westernmost corner at the Lone Rock Beach Campground. It's been an amazing visit. Tomorrow, we start our journey back eastward.
On Wednesday, March 13th, we spent the whole day traveling southeast on the Navajo Reservation. As we traveled across the land, you can see the cliffs of the large mesas on our right. Up there is the land of the Hopi tribe. The Navajo Reservation surrounds the Hopi. The Navajo live in structures lightly sparse throughout this huge reservation. In fact, today was the first day we saw native villages. The largest of all Native American reservations, the Navajo measures 16 million acres and stretches over 4 states. Today, our main objective was to tour Canyon de Chelly, which is a sacred place for the Navajos. While no major river flows through the canyon, millions of years of uplifting and stream erosion created these amazing formations. The ancients, known as the Anasazi, farmed the rich bottomland until 1300 AD or so when they moved out. Their Hopi descendants migrated to the land below, but moved eventually to the high mesas we saw on our trip here. Finally, the Navajo occupied the area, and you can still see some of their farms below. We drove along the north arm of the canyon where you could see Massacre Cave. There, in 1805, 115 Navajo were killed, and 33 were taken prisoner by Spanish troops. We moved on to view the Mummy Cave and Yucca Cave ruins, which were occupied by the ancients sometime between 1500 BC and 1300 AD. In the 1280s, the Anasazi, who migrated from Mesa Verde, built the tower complex that rests on the central ledge. In the camera lens, it looks like a dollhouse, but it is an actual village. The most amazing sight was Spider Rock on the farthest end of the South Arm. It is a 700-foot sandstone spire which some believe was originally affixed to the canyon's side, then isolated by the continual downstream flow of water. It is named for Spider Woman, a key figure in the Navajo creation story. Doug got some interesting video of the Anasazi ruins on the other rim of the canyon just west of Spider Rock. Where the two arms of the canyon converge, one can see today's farming activities. That was the first canyon we saw that didn't have a lot of water running through it. It seemed really strange to see people living and farming on the canyon floor. After leaving Canyon de Chelly, we traveled southeast, still on the Navajo reservation. The topography totally changed, turning much greener with what became forests. As we approached our destination of Gallup, New Mexico, we were greeted with more and more snow. We were 6,600 feet up, and it was cold. Add to that, our GPS took us on a wayward approach to the town, which made for seeing some interesting wild burros. We wondered, if we broke down, would AAA even find us out here? But we made it. And that concludes, for all intents and purposes, our winter 2024 Southwest adventure. We are already looking forward to next year. Until then, adios.